Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the bitter, breath-stealing cold of medieval Europe, the kind of winter that didn't just nip your nose but tried to chew through your bones. Picture this, a thatched roof above your head, creaking and groaning as frost forms tiny white daggers along the beams. The floor beneath you is packed dirt, the walls are drafty, and your only real insulation is the body heat of your family, a goat, and possibly 3 chickens. Outside, the wind claws at your shutters like a beast kept at bay only by the thinnest slats of wood. You're wrapped in a woolen cloak so coarse it could exfoliate your skin, and still, your toes are numb. Welcome to a world where the definition of cozy is just not currently dying of exposure. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where in the world you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You awaken before the sun. It's not your choice. A cold has a funny way of shaking you awake before your dreams are finished. Your breath puffs visibly into the dark, and it takes a full minute to convince your joints to move. You curl tighter under a threadbare wool blanket that smells like sheep, smoke, and possibly your brother's feet. The fire is dead. That's the first real problem of the day. A peasant's life isn't measured in meals or coins, it's measured in firewood. You only have so much, and you're already down to sticks. The richer villagers get oak logs, slow burning and fragrant. You get what you find in the forest, damp twigs, maybe some birch if you're lucky. But today, even the kindling looks frozen. You curse under your breath gently. Of course, this is a PG-13 household. Slipping your feet into stiff leather shoes that feel like 2 frozen potatoes, you shuffle across the cold floor and check outside. The frost is so thick it crunches underfoot like brittle sugar. Icicles dangle from the eaves, long and sharp enough to double as self-defense weapons. Across the road, your neighbor's roof has collapsed under snow weight again. It's moments like these you remember one of the most mainstream facts about medieval living. There was no insulation, not really, just thatch, wattle, and daub, straw and mud slapped between wooden beams. Great for letting the structure breathe, also great for letting the snow in. But here's a strange tidbit most people don't know. In some northern European villages, peasants actually let livestock live in the house, not just for companionship or security but because the combined body heat of a cow or 2 could bump the indoor temperature by several degrees. Imagine sharing your sleeping space with a snoring ox. Romance dies quickly when the air smells like manure and old cheese. You shiver, haul in a bucket of snow to melt later, and start prepping the fire, flint and steel in trembling hands. Sparks, then smoke, then glorious, stubborn flame. It's not much, but it's enough. Historians still argue whether the Little Ice Age, roughly from the 14th to 19th century, was a sudden shift or a slow climate creep. But you don't need a historian to tell you this winter feels like the devil's exhale. Outside, the world is still. Snow blankets the fields. Trees stand silent and skeletal. The village sleeps, or pretends to. But within these creaky homes, across miles of peasantry and poverty, there's one shared truth: the night is cruel, and the cold doesn't care how strong you are. Still, you made it through one more night. You're sore, slightly frostbitten, and your left pinky toe might be a lost cause, but you're here. And in the medieval world, that's not nothing. You squat beside the fire, coaxing it like it's a sulking child, of feeding it little scraps, blowing gently, shielding it from the draft. It flickers, sputters, and finally catches, casting trembling gold across the walls. The hearth might be small, cracked, and soot blackened, but in this world, it's the heart of your home, literally and symbolically. And if you think a medieval hearth was always warm and lively, think again. Half the time, the smoke doesn't even leave properly. because chimneys weren't a peasant luxury for centuries. Instead, the smoke slithered out through a hole in the roof or didn't. You've coughed more in your life than you've spoken, and your eyes sting with every breath. But hey, at least it means the fire's working. Today's task: keep the house from becoming a popsicle. But here's the thing, they didn't just sit around fires telling stories and roasting chestnuts. Peasant life didn't come with snow days. You rise, stretch, and gather what few embers remain. You're about to commit a very medieval act of recycling. You scoop some coals into an earthen pot, cover it with ashes, and carry it outside under your cloak. This, dear listener, is your portable heat-rub brazier of hope called a chafing pot. Don't touch it to your leg unless you want a burn that looks like the Holy Roman Empire. And if you think that sounds primitive, well, these were clever folk. Archaeologists still find bits of scorched pottery in ruins and grave sites, evidence that peasants used whatever means they could to stay warm. A broken bar including literally hugging fire. You head out to find more wood because the hearth might be never empty, but only if you never stop feeding it. Your fingers are numb after 5 minutes, the frost clings to branches like a jealous ghost, and every twig you break off feels like a tiny betrayal to some frozen forest spirit. By the time you return, the smoke has filled the home again. Your mother's wiping her eyes with her apron, not crying, just breathing. You dump the wood beside the hearth like it's treasure, because it is. And then comes the sorting. Dry enough for today, damp enough for later, and soaking wet let's hope next week pile. There's a strange kind of intimacy in tending fire as a family. You take turns blowing, poking, shielding. It's a dance, a ritual. Warmth is never taken for granted. And the irony? Fire was just as dangerous as the cold. One careless spark, and thatched roofs went up like parchment dipped in oil. Entire villages burned down more often than you'd like to think. Still, the fire tonight is good, strong, crackling, bright enough to cast dancing shadows on the low ceiling beams. You gather near, all of you, knees touching, cheeks pinking. A pot of something vaguely edible simmers above the flame. Root vegetables, maybe a scrap of bacon if you're lucky. A mainstream fact: the average medieval peasant consumed about 3,000 to 4,000 calories per day and winter, much of it from bread, ale, and porridge. They burned it fast, just staying alive. And here's a fringe one for the trivia night you'll never have. In parts of Eastern Europe, families would bury smoldering embers under a pile of sheep dung, to preserve heat until morning. Smelly? Absolutely. Effective? Weirdly, yes. As you sit by the fire, someone begins to hum a lullaby, a folk song. You don't know. It's warm, it's familiar. The flames catch a rhythm, as if they remember the tune. Your eyelids flutter. The warmth starts creeping back into your limbs. Maybe tonight won't be so bad. Historians still argue whether firewood scarcity was more dire in urban areas or rural villages. You, however, argue with the wind when it steals your smoke, or with the dog when he tries to nap too close to the flame. That's the real debate. The hearth is the anchor, the altar, the battlefield. You will kneel before it every day this winter and offer everything you can: time, breath, hands. And in return, it gives just enough life to get you through the coldest nights in history. The fire crackles behind you, a small miracle earned through ash-streaked fingers and patient breath. But night will come again, as it always does, and the cold will return with its familiar cruelty. So, you prepare you not with thick blankets or radiant heaters, but with the medieval tactic of clumping. You know the drill. Everyone sleeps in the same room, in the same bed if space allows, piled together like cats in a barn. Your father snores like a church bell, your sister kicks in her sleep, and the baby always ends up the warmest, nestled dead center beneath layers of coarse wool, fur, and human limbs. There's no privacy, not even a shred. It's warmth over dignity. That's how you survive. And if you're lucky, if the day's chores are done, and there's no argument about whose feet smell worse. You might even sleep. Here's a mainstream historical fact: families in medieval Europe often shared a single bed. The phrase "sleep tight" literally comes from the practice of tightening ropes beneath straw mattresses to keep them firm. That's the part people romanticize. What they don't mention is the fleas. You scratch your leg beneath the blanket, and something definitely scratches back. You try not to think about it, and it's not just family you might share the space with. Depending on the season, a goat or two could be in the corner, maybe chickens in a box, clucking sleepily. Their body heat is no joke. A single cow could raise the temperature in a room by 5 degrees Fahrenheit. That may not sound like much to you now, but when your eyelids are crusted with ice and your breath fogs in front of your face in Dorset, it's enough to matter. Some scholars argue this practice was more common in Northern Europe than elsewhere, especially in places where winters were particularly harsh. Others suggest it was a necessity born not of custom, but of desperation. Whatever the reason, you learn quickly to accept the sounds, smells, and squirming limbs of communal sleeping as the price of surviving the cold. You shift, trying to find a position where your feet aren't touching someone else's wet socks. You fail. The blanket's itchy, the straw mattress pokes your ribs, and someone just let out a fart with the subtlety of a cathedral bell. But strangely, you're grateful, because tonight, you're not sleeping alone. You've got a warm body to your left, another behind you, and your arms numb because your little cousin has made it her pillow. It's uncomfortable, it's crowded, it's completely medieval. And here's a quirky little tidbit: in some households, people didn't even bother undressing at night. Why would they? Getting naked meant risking exposure. Some peasants wore their day clothes to bathe and then wore them again the next day, and the next. Underwear, optional. Bathing, rare. So if you think modern couples struggle with bedroom freshness, imagine sharing your sleep with 6 unwashed humans and a goose. Still, you drift. The fire dies down, and the darkness grows thick. But here, in this pile of limbs and shared breath, you feel the faintest illusion of safety. Historians still argue whether this style of sleeping strengthened familial bonds or quietly drove everyone mad. You think it's both. You love your family. You'd also sell them for a heated blanket and a mattress that doesn't bite back. But tonight, you'll take what you can get: the warmth of shared bodies, the low whistle of wind outside, the sleepy mumble of your grandfather telling some story you've heard 100 times before, each word slower than the last. You yawn. The blankets shift. Someone grumbles in their sleep, and just before you drift off, you reach over and pull the blanket a little tighter around your little cousin's shoulder. Because if there's one thing the cold has taught you, it's this: warmth isn't just about fire. Sometimes, it's just having someone beside you who's still breathing. You wake before dawn again, and not because the rooster crows, but because your left leg feels like it's been dipped in a frozen river. The blanket has migrated during the night, leaving your foot exposed to the bitter air, and in medieval homes, that's basically an invitation for frostbite. With a groan, you sit up, joints stiff, hair matted, and your face smeared with sleep and soot. You peel back the cover so carefully, so as not to wake the tangle of snoring relatives, and you begin the next crucial ritual of survival: the layering. There is no wardrobe, no wooden chest filled with clean, warm clothes. What you wear in the dead of winter is what you have, what hasn't already been patched beyond recognition or chewed by mice. First comes the undershift. It's rough spun linen, coarse and scratchy, but it's the closest thing to skin-friendly fabric you own. Over that goes the woolen tunic, once dark brown, now an ambiguous shade of farm dirt. If you're lucky, you've got a second tunic to layer. Then the hose, 2 long woolen tubes that you wrestle onto your legs, one at a time, like sad medieval yoga pants. Wool socks if you have them get pulled over your hose. And then come the layers of rags, sashes, a spare cloak draped like a shawl, someone's old cape that smells faintly of ale and smoke. You fasten what you can with a bone pin and tuck the rest in, praying to all saints that no wind sneaks in through the gaps. Straw is everywhere. You use it as stuffing inside shoes, bedding filler, and insulation around windows. It crunches when you walk, it itches where you sit, but it keeps the cold at bay barely. Here's your mainstream history fact of the night. By the 13th century, peasants in northern Europe had adopted wool as their go-to winter fabric. It was scratchy, yes, but water-resistant and reasonably warm even when damp, which, let's be honest, was always. But here's a delightful fringe tidbit. In some Scandinavian villages, people stuffed dried moss inside their clothing as insulation. That's right, nature's version of thermal padding, clean, spongy, and surprisingly effective. It also made for excellent toilet paper, though ideally not the same moss. You glance over at your brother, who's wrapping his feet in torn linen strips before shoving them into stiff leather shoes. Not exactly ergonomic, definitely not waterproof, but they'll hold. Now, outside awaits. It's your turn to fetch water from the frozen well. You brace yourself, check your layers, grab your bucket, and open the door. A wall of icy wind punches you in the face like a debt collector. Your breath leaves instantly, your eyes tear up, and for one tiny, delusional moment, you wonder whether you might just turn around and crawl back into that human heat pile. But you trudge forward, because you have to. Historians still argue whether medieval clothing customs were more influenced by practicality or religious modesty. In winter, the answer seems obvious. You wear everything you can find and hope no one notices that your cloak was once a tablecloth. You reach the well, the bucket's frozen. You chip away at the ice with your knife, muttering a prayer to Saint Bridget or anyone who might listen. Your fingers go numb instantly. You slap them against your thighs, trying to coax circulation. You succeed, a broken bar slightly. With a victorious grunt, you draw up a bucket of slushy water. It sloshes on your shoes. They soak it up like sad, hungry sponges. You'll pay for that later. Back inside, steam from the cooking pot hits your face. Bliss. The others are up now, wrestling with their own layers, adding dried grass to their boots, checking for holes in cloaks. It's a production, a pre-battle ritual. And it hits you, oh, this is the armor of the peasant class. Not metal or chainmail, just wool, straw, moss, and grit. You pile your clothes near the fire to dry, peel off the wettest layer, and for one fleeting moment, your skin feels the flame directly. It stings, it heals, it reminds you you're still alive. The wind howls like a hungry beast outside, slipping its icy fingers through every crack, knot, and crevice in the walls. You thought you sealed them yesterday. I stuffed trags in the corners, jammed moss into the window slats, and wedged a broom head into the bottom of the door, but somehow, the cold always finds a way in. You wrap your arms around yourself and shuffle closer to the hearth. It's still smoldering, but the heat barely touches the corners of the room. Your little cousin huddles in the nook beneath the stairs, buried beneath 3 cloaks and half a curtain. Your grandmother mutters about spirits riding the wind tonight. You're not sure she's wrong. You grab a roll of cloth and start making another pass along the walls, pressing the fabric into the joins between boards and mud. Your fingers are numb, but you keep going, because in here, even a 1-degree drop means waking up with frost on your eyebrows, or worse, not waking up at all. Here's a mainstream fact for you. Most medieval homes were built with wattle and daub thin wooden beams plastered with a mix of clay, straw, animal dung, and sand. Insulation? Barely. Water resistance? Questionable. You might as well invite the wind to dinner and offer it your best stool. But there were upgrades. If you were lucky or clever, you might hang old tapestries on the walls. Not for decoration, mind you, they acted as crude insulation, holding a thin barrier between your bones and the frigid night air. Some folks even tried stuffing hay into the wall gaps, which helped until the mice moved in and made it their winter resort. And here's a strange, often forgotten tidbit. In the Alps and other mountainous regions, people used hollowed logs filled with ash or charcoal, sealed with clay, as makeshift radiators. They'd bury them in the walls or near sleeping areas for a slow, dry release of warmth. Think of it as medieval passive heating without the marketing team. As the wind picks up, the shutters rattle like bones. You press your weight against them. A howl echoes through the gaps, a sharp, sudden. You freeze, listening. Was that wind, or something else? Your father says it's just the weather. Your mother says it's the wolves. Your grandmother leans close and whispers a name you don't recognize. A spirit, she says, that rides winter gusts and steals breath from open mouths. You laugh, a little nervously, not because you believe her, but because some nights, the cold does feel alive. Historians still argue whether medieval people believed more in saints or spirits during the cold season. Truth is, they probably didn't separate the two. When your roof leaks and your bread freezes solid, you pray to whoever's listening. Whether it's Saint Hubert or a snow sprite named Olga, you reinforce the shutter with another plank and shove a bucket against the base. It might hold, it might not. Either way, you'll know by morning. You return to the center of the room, where the fire spits embers in protest. The wind moans louder now. There's a rhythm to Ida, long, low groans, broken by sharp whistles as it squeezes through the walls. The whole house groans back, like an old man with bad knees. You stare at the ceiling beams, counting them, pretending they're holding up more than just the roof, pretending they're strong enough to carry the weight of winter, of your family, of every breath that escapes your lips and turns instantly to mist. And still, the cold presses in, not just as temperature, but as presence. It's everywhere, and nowhere. A thing you fight with every rag and pot of soup and extra pair of socks. And yet, you're still here. The wind still can't take that away from you. You pull your cloak tighter, step outside, and instantly regret it. The wind doesn't wait to greet you. It hits like a slap from an angry ancestor. Snow crunches beneath your boots, hard-packed and crusted over with ice, and you lower your head like a guilty thief caught in winter's glare. But you're going. You have to. It's midwinter fair day. The town is hosting a snow market, one of those rare moments when even the poorest folk bundle up, trudge through drifts, and trade the bleakness of home for the brief chaos of company. You're not expecting luxury, no roasted venison or silk scarves, but maybe, just maybe, you'll score a piece of salted pork or a clove of garlic, something that smells like not dying. The road to town is barely more than a slushy rut. You pass others along the way, figures hunched beneath cloaks, baskets on backs, eyes squinting through the glare. One man rides a cart pulled by a donkey so frostbitten it looks like it's auditioning to be a rug. And yet, people joke. Someone makes fun of your patched boots. You reply with something about his beard looking like a squirrel died on his chin. You laugh. It's the kind of laugh you only get when your face hurts from cold, but you're still just stubborn enough to think it's funny. Mainstream fact incoming. Medieval fairs, especially midwinter markets, were crucial for community survival. Villagers traded surplus, shared rumors, and bartered handmade goods for necessities. Fairs weren't just about celebration, they were how people got through winter. One spoonful of mead, one scarf, one pickled turnip at a time. And here's a fringe tidbit. Some winter fairs included bizarre games to warm the blood. There are accounts of people competing in barefoot snow races, or smacking each other with frozen eels. Yes, eels. Historians still argue whether these traditions were real customs or exaggerated by later chroniclers with a flair for the theatrical. But honestly, you'd believe it. People do weird things when they're cold and bored. As you approach the town square, the air starts to buzz. Wooden stalls line the frost-covered cobblestones, and lanterns sway in the breeze like glowing fruit. There's music, rough, uneven, played on a flute that's definitely seen better centuries. Someone's juggling potatoes while wearing nothing but a tunic and frostbite. You barter a pair of old socks for half a loaf of onion bread. Not fresh, but edible. You trade a carved wooden spoon for a cracked beeswax candle. And then, like divine providence, someone hands you a mug of something steaming, hot meat, or maybe just hot water with a hint of honey and a lot of imagination. Either way, it hits your stomach like a warm handshake. You hold the cup like it's sacred. Your breath curls in the air like incense. The townsfolk gather around a fire pit in the center of the square. You see children dancing with dogs, old men cursing about taxes, and a toothless woman trying to sell icicles as holy relics from Saint Wencesla's beard. It's ridiculous, and it's wonderful. You're still freezing, your nose is dripping, your toes are numb, and your ears feel like they might shatter if someone flicks them, but you don't care, because right now, you're part of something alive, a village of shivering souls wrapped in wool and stubbornness, daring winter to do its worst. Historians still argue whether medieval fairs were primarily economic or spiritual events. You figure they were both, because out here, beneath the wind and the smoke and the raucous chatter, you can almost feel something holy about it. People choosing to gather, to trade, to laugh in defiance of the cold. You pocket your bread, wrap the candle in cloth, and take one last look around the snow-laced square before heading home. The wind is still there, waiting, but this time, you grin at it, because tonight, you'll eat a little better, light the house a little longer, and maybe just maybe dream of eels and laughter instead of frost and silence. You push the door open and step into the warmth or, well, the relative less freezingness of the alehouse. The change is immediate. Your ears, which had gone numb somewhere around the crossroads, tingle as if they've been slapped awake. Your cheeks flush, your nose starts dripping in earnest, but you're grinning like a fool, because here, finally, it's warm. The air is thick with smoke and stories. You inhale a blend of roasted meat, old sweat, spilled ale, and wet wool, and somehow, it smells like safety. Voices bounce off the low ceiling beams. Laughter bursts in every corner. Someone's singing loudly and badly, and no one seems to mind. A black dog dozes by the fire, steaming gently like a furry kettle. You weave through the crowd, bumping into elbows and shoulder cloaks, nodding to familiar faces. You spot old Brenna at her usual table, cup in hand and her chin tucked into her collar like a turtle. She hasn't missed a night in 20 winters. She claims ale is liquid insulation, and you're beginning to agree. Mainstream fact of the night, alehouses were central to medieval life via not just as places to drink, but to gather, exchange news, escape the cold, and occasionally settle a bet with a quick game of basset or a round of public shaming. For peasants, they were one of the only public indoor spaces with consistent heat, not because they were well built, but because they were packed with people, and people are basically walking fireplaces. You wedge yourself into a corner near the hearth. Someone hands you a mug. It's warm to the touch. You don't ask what's in it. You drink. It could be ale, or cider, or a fermented surprise brewed in someone's bathtub. Whatever it is, it burns just enough to make you feel human again. Here's a fringe tidbit to chew on. In especially harsh winters, some alehouses in the Low Countries offered fire bench as a stone or wood seating built right over the baking ovens. If you got there early, you could warm your backside while sipping your brew. It was the medieval equivalent of heated seating and no subscription required. Around you, the stories begin to flow faster than the drink. Someone swears they saw wolf tracks in the snow the size of dinner plates. Someone else claims their rooster laid an egg and now they're cursed. A farmer from the next village insists he's invented a way to keep sheep warm using only cabbage leaves and divine inspiration. You laugh, you sip, you feel your shoulders drop for the first time in days. Historians still argue whether alehouses were considered respectable gathering places or morally dubious dens of sin. Frankly, you don't care, because here, your boots are off, your toes are thawing, and your fingers no longer feel like frozen sausages. Someone starts a song, a bawdy one about a blacksmith's daughter and a barrel of meat. You don't know all the words, but you hum along. There's a rhythm to the place, a heartbeat. It pulses through the wood, the floor, the mugs, the laughter. For a moment, you're not cold, you're not hungry, you're just here. The fire flares in the hearth, casting shadows like dancing devils. You stretch your feet toward the flame and let the warmth soak in, bone deep. You think, let it snow, let it howl, let the wind tear the shutters off. Tonight, you've got ale in your belly, heat on your skin, and enough stories to carry home in your cloak. And that, in the bleak heart of medieval winter, is as close as you'll ever get to paradise. You step out of the alehouse just in time for your breath to catch midair and freeze like smoke from a ghost's pipe. The warmth you'd gathered by the fire evaporates in seconds. Your coat flaps against your legs. The cold's waiting outside like an angry landlord, and it wants its rent. But you're not heading home just yet. There's another stop, and it's one you can't skip. And not tonight. It's Christmas Eve. You've fallen with a small group of villagers, each wrapped in layers like woolen onions, and together you trudge toward the church. Snow crunches underfoot. Icicles hang from thatched roofs like rows of frozen teeth. Somewhere behind you, someone sneezes so hard it echoes down the alleyway like a trumpet call to war. The church stands at the far end of the village, its steeple leaning slightly like it's tired of braving the cold too. The bell rings low, deep, and slow, the kind of sound that settles into your bones whether you want it to or not. You push open the heavy wooden door and step into the dimly lit sanctuary. The air inside is barely warmer than outside, but it smells like quakes and pine branches and old stone, an oddly comforting combination. People file in, stamping their feet, shaking off snow, nodding to neighbors in quiet greeting. The pews are worn smooth from generations of worry and worship. You settle onto one, wincing as the cold wood bites through your layers. Your fingers move instinctively, a hat off, hand over heart, eyes to the altar. Mainstream fact, church services were among the few communal events that brought everyone together during winter, especially on holidays. Religious rituals gave structure to the calendar and meaning to the long, hard nights. And in winter, meaning matters. The priest begins to speak. His voice is dry as parchment but carries weight. Candles flicker, casting golden halos against the high, vaulted ceiling. The Latin rolls over you like a tidea barely understood, but strangely soothing. You murmur the responses along with the crowd, your breath visible in the flickering light like little prayers floating upward. Here's a fringe detail that would shock your modern sensibilities. In parts of medieval France and Italy, churches sometimes placed live animals near the altar during Christmas services to warm the Christ child. Imagine trying to focus on a sermon while a goat bleats next to the pulpit. You scan the room. Children sleep curled against their mothers. A farmer nods off mid-hymn, jerking awake just in time for the amen. One woman clutches a loaf of bread like it's holy relic. And maybe, tonight, it is. The cold still seeps through the stone walls, but you're surrounded by others. People like you. Cold, yes. Tired, always, but still showing up, still singing, still hoping. Historians still argue whether Christmas services in medieval Europe were more solemn ritual or community performance. In truth, it's both. It's reverence and resilience wrapped together in one wool-smelling, foot-numbing gathering. You bow your head and close your eyes. You're not thinking of saints or sin. You're thinking of the stew waiting back home, and how many logs are left beside the hearth, and whether the snow will stop before the roofs sag again. The service ends with a low murmur of voices and a closing hymn, sung off-key but full-hearted. The bell tolls once more. You step out into the night, and this time, the cold doesn't feel quite so sharp. Maybe it's the lingering heat from the candles, maybe it's the comfort of ritual, or maybe it's just the borrowed warmth of 100 voices rising into the dark. You pull your cloak tight, turn your face into the wind, and begin the walk home. By the time you reach the edge of your village, the snow has thickened, each step is heavier now, boots packed with slush and your cloak stiff with frost. The air feels brittly, like even the moon might shatter if someone sang too loud. You spot the manor house on the hill as stone, towering, lit from within by the soft orange flicker of a dozen hearths. It looks like a fortress of warmth, unreachable and vaguely smug. You try not to resent it, because tonight, the Lord Steward is distributing alms. You join a line of villagers that winds like a frozen snake down the path to the manor gates. Everyone's bundled in their finest rags, which is to say their least holy ones. You recognize a few faces as a Marian from the weaver's shop, her cheeks bright as apples. Old Tom, already snoring on his feet, and Gertie, with 6 children clinging to her like frost-covered barnacles. There's no talking, just breath clouds and shivering. You shift from foot to foot to stay alive while the guards open the gates just enough to let one soul through at a time. Mainstream fact: during harsh winters or holy days, medieval lords were expected, at least in theory, to provide relief to their peasants. Food, firewood, old clothing. It wasn't charity so much as responsibility. After all, dead peasants don't pay taxes. Inside, you're herded toward a table stacked with wooden bowls. A pot of thin stew bubbles behind it, and the smell makes your stomach cramp with anticipation. You hand over a token of something you carved from bone last week and receive a half bowl of turnip broth and a chunk of brown bread so dense it could stun a rabbit. It's glorious. You eat it right there, standing in the snow, as warm fat dribbles down your chin and the bread scrapes your throat like sandpaper. You'd weep if your tears didn't freeze halfway down your face. Here's a fringe tidbit: in some regions, lords would offer not just food, but small blessing coins of cheaply minted metal tokens blessed by the local priest. Technically worthless, but thought to bring protection or at least goodwill from God. You've got 2 buried in your boot lining. Do they work? Who knows? But your toes haven't fallen off yet. As you turn to leave, a guard presses something into your palm, a tallow candle, stubby and already melting from the warmth of his glove. It's not much, but it might buy you 1 more hour of light tonight, 1 more hour where the dark doesn't win. Historians still argue whether almsgiving was motivated by faith, fear, or political convenience. You figure it's a mix. Some lords want salvation, some want praise, some just want to keep the village quiet and undead until spring. You walk home with the bowl tucked in your arm like treasure. The cold clings tighter now, the sky's a deep indigo, and snow drifts sideways across the path. But your belly is fuller, and your hand is warmer. Back home, the others crowd around as you share what's left of the bread. The stew's long gone, but they don't mind. The smell on your breath is proof that kindness still happens sometimes. The candle gets lit and placed on the table. Its flicker dances in everyone's eyes, and for a moment, even as the wind growls at the door and the frost thickens on the window panes, you remember what it's like to feel rich. The candle burns low, casting long shadows that stretch and sway across the walls like silent puppets. You sit near the hearth, wrapping a frayed shawl tighter around your shoulders while your grandmother digs through the cupboard for one of her miracle cures. Someone sniffled too loudly during dinner. That's all it takes. One cough, and suddenly the whole household is convinced the plague is knocking. She shuffles back with a handful of oddities, an onion sliced in half, a cloth pouch filled with dried lavender and something pungent, and a clay jar that smells faintly of garlic and fear. The remedies are coming out. Here's your mainstream fact: medieval people had an incredibly resourceful, if occasionally delusional, approach to medicine. Without access to modern science or sanitized instruments, they relied on folk knowledge, herbal mixtures, and generations of superstition. The line between cure and curse was often blurry. She smears something onto your chest, goose grease, warm, oily, and definitely something that used to honk. You grimace as she slaps it in place like she's oiling a saddle. Then she ties a wool cloth around your torso, mumbling something about keeping the demons from settling in your lungs. Next, garlic, crushed, stuffed into your socks, allegedly draws out illness through the feet. You try not to think about it as your toes marinate like dinner. And now for the drink. Goat's milk, warm, mixed with honey, thyme, and a dash of mystery. You sip. It tastes like a meadow got confused and cried in your cup. Still, you drink it, because you've seen worse, like the time your cousin had a fever and the village healer stuck a live frog in his mouth for moist heat balance. Spoiler, it didn't work. Also, the frog escaped. Here's a fringe tidbit for your trivia dreams. Some medieval doctors believed wrapping patients in freshly slaughtered animal skins could draw illness away from the body. Sheep, rabbits or whatever you could catch. Historians still argue whether this was symbolic healing or just wishful, squishy thinking. Tonight, though, it's garlic, grease, goat's milk, and quiet prayers. The fire flickers. Someone sneezes again. You all freeze, then laugh nervously. That's all it is, you say. Just a sneeze. Not a demon, not a fever, just winter being cruel. You lay down near the hearth again, wrapped like a roast. The garlic is working its way through your senses. Your eyes sting, your stomach protests, but you feel a broken bar warm. For now, historians debate whether folk remedies helped or harmed more in the long run. You figure, if it kept people hopeful, if it kept them trying, it was worth something. Your grandmother pats your cheek, muttering that you'll be fine come morning. You believe her, not because the grease works, but because she says it does, and that, in a world with no doctors, no thermometers, and no antibiotics, might be the strongest medicine there is. The candle flickers, the garlic steams, and the cold, just for now, holds its breath. The village sleeps again, mostly, but not you. Not tonight. You've drawn the short straw or perhaps the long one, depending on how one feels about standing outside in a blizzard with a flaming stick for company. You are tonight's night watch. It's a strange medieval custom, often skipped over in tales of chivalry and church bells. Every few nights, one or two villagers take shifts patrolling the edges of town, keeping an eye out for thieves, drunks, and worsey wolves. You wrap your cloak tight, stuff straw down your boots, and light your torch. The flame sputters as snowflakes land and sizzle, but it holds. You step outside, and the cold kisses your cheeks like an ex-lover you never wanted to see again. The wind has changed. It's slower, thicker, more deliberate, the kind that doesn't scream, it listens. You make your rounds, past barns and haystacks, frozen wells and creaking fences. The moon is bright, casting everything in silver blue. Your shadow stretches long across the snow like a stretched-out ghost. Mainstream fact for the hour: medieval Europe's rural villages often organized some form of voluntary night watch during harsh winters, and not only for protection, but because fire was a constant threat. Chimneys weren't common, after all, and if someone fell asleep too close to the hearth, a small ember could mean an entire street burned before morning. You stop at the edge of the woods. The trees sway just slightly, black against the stars, and then you hear it, not the wind, something else, a crunch. You grip your torch tighter. Slowly, cautiously, you scan the tree line. Then another sound, a low growl, not loud, not close, but present. You've heard the stories: wolves stalking in packs, following the smoke of cooking fires, waiting for livestock or children left alone too long. In some places, they say the wolves speak with human voices to lure people into the woods. Fringe tidbit time: there are medieval accounts slightly exaggerated, but vivid, of wolf attacks so coordinated they were blamed on witches shape-shifting into beasts. One French record from the 15th century describes a man-wolf attacking travelers until a priest exorcised the forest. Historians still argue whether these tales were allegories or panic-fueled folklore. Either way, you're not sticking around to ask for an autograph. You move on, past the church, whose bell tower looms like a watchful eye, past the blacksmith's shop, where snow has buried the anvil, past the silent, snow-covered mound that used to be old Marta's cottage, collapsed under snow last week. No one was in Sadia, but no one was quite sure either. The torch is nearly out. You head back toward the center of town, your limbs numb, your boots soaked, but you did your part. You walked the perimeter. You saw no danger, or at least, nothing that followed you. Back inside, you hang the torch near the door to dry. A bowl of something warm, a barley broth, turnip tea, awaits by the fire. You sip. It tastes like disappointment and comfort. Historians still debate whether night watch duties were voluntary, enforced, or passed down like a chore wheel no one wanted. But tonight, as your hands slowly thaw and the torch smolders behind you, you feel oddly proud. You were out there, in the cold, in the dark, among wolves and wind and whispered legends, and you came back. The storm came in fast. You barely had time to bolt the shutters before the wind screamed through the village like it was tearing open the sky itself. Snow fell in sheets, sideways, thick enough to erase the world beyond your doorstep. Now, hours later, it hasn't stopped. You sit curled beside the hearth, wrapped in every blanket, shawl, and curtain your house has ever known. The fire's dying, the wood pile is down to kindling, and there's an eerie silence under the howling, like the storm is listening for weakness. Your breath clouds in the air. You've worn this same tunic for 3 days now, and you can't feel your fingertips. The straw under your bedding crackles with frost. Someone nearby coughs. You pull your knees closer, thinking of that winter. The winter. Everyone in the village knows the story. It's passed from lip to lip like a sacred warning about the time a blizzard hit so fast, so hard, that it buried the entire village at the edge of the forest. Roofs collapsed under snow, smoke froze in chimneys, and when rescuers finally arrived, weeks later, they found nothing but ice-covered ruins and a single chicken still alive, perched on the church altar. Mainstream historical fact: the Great Famine of 1315 1317 wasn't just about hunger, it was about cold. Torrential rains and sudden freezes destroyed crops across Europe. Whole regions starved, entire hamlets vanished. It wasn't a snow globe fantasia, it was survival roulette. And then there's the French version. Some accounts say that during one snowstorm in the Alpine regions, villages lit bonfires atop towers to signal they were still alive. When the lights stopped, no more signals, no more village. Historians still argue whether these collapses were isolated events or symptoms of the broader Little Ice Age, a centuries-long climate shift that punished the poor with precision. You don't care about the terms, you just know what snow can do when it stops pretending to be pretty. Tonight feels like that kind of night. The house creaks as snow presses down on the roof. You imagine the beams bending it just slightly. You hold your breath, listen, pray. Outside, the world has vanished. No shapes, no trees, no sounds but wind and white. You toss the last piece of firewood into the hearth. It flares weakly, as if it knows it's your final offering. You try not to let the others see your face fall, and then, a knock. You all freeze. For a full 5 seconds, no one moves. Another knock is slow, deliberate, like a question. You rise, legs numb, and step toward the door. You brace it, open it just a crack. It's Tom, the old miller's son. His beard is rimed with frost, his eyes wide. He says nothing, and just holds out an armful of firewood, scavenged from the fallen fence behind his barn. You take it, dumbly. You nod. He nods. No words needed. He turns, vanishing into the white. You feed the fire. It snaps to life. Warmth spreads. The room glows. And just like that, the storm feels a little less cruel. Because here's the unspoken truth of winters like this. It's not just the snow that buries people, it's silence, isolation, but sometimes, someone knocks, and sometimes, someone answers. The snow finally stops sometime just before dawn. You know this not because the wind comes or because the sun rises. No, it's the stillness that wakes you, a silence so complete it hums, the kind of hush that only follows something monstrous. You sit up slowly, brushing frost from your eyebrows, heart pounding at the eerie quiet. The fire is out again. Your breath curls like smoke as you pull on stiff boots and peer out the window. The village is unrecognizable. Snow has erased paths, buried fences, and turned familiar rooftops into rounded, sleeping beasts. The world looks softer, gentler, even, but you know better. Beneath that delicate sheen lies ruin. Somewhere out there, someone's roof didn't hold. Somewhere out there, someone didn't wake up. You trudge outside. Each step is struggle. Snow is past your knees. Every movement requires effort. By the time you reach the barn, your legs ache and your face burns from wind bite. You push open the barn door. Silence. Then a flutter. One chicken, one glorious, frost-covered chicken clucks indignantly at the disturbance. You nearly laugh. Inside the coop, there are fewer birds than before, fewer sounds. You check the corners. You count. You don't finish. You just a broken bar. Move on. Mainstream fact: winter starvation was often silent, spread out across weeks, hidden by pride and routine. There are records of entire villages going one meal a day or none. In the worst years, people boiled leather or chewed bark. Hunger became a second cold, gnawing from within. You return home, snow clinging to your cloak. The house feels smaller. You break the last chunk of stale bread and pass it around. You don't eat. You say you're full. No one argues. The children ask if spring is coming. You say yes. Fringe tidbit: in parts of Eastern Europe, peasants carved small wooden charms shaped like the sun and placed them in the hearth to remind spring it was welcome. Some even sang to Ida songs full of nonsense and hope. Historians still argue whether this was ancient superstition or the echoes of forgotten pagan rites wrapped in Christian sugarcoating. But when you've gone 4 months without fresh fruit, singing to the sun makes more sense than silence. Later, you help dig out your neighbor's door. The roof held, but barely. Inside, it's colder than outside. You find their old cat curled near the ashes. You don't ask questions. You just give them half your candle. That night, the stew is thinner than usual, but someone tells a story, an old one about a boy who tricked winter by wearing summer clothes and pretending not to notice the cold. The tale makes no sense, but it gets a laugh, even a few smiles, and maybe that's the point. You watch your breath rise toward the rafters and imagine it joining 1,000 other tiny ghosts of survival dancing above fireless hearths. The cold's still here, the snow still presses down, but you've made it through the worst night yet. Maybe tomorrow, someone finds a rabbit snare full. Maybe the snow softens, maybe the sun shows its face, or maybe not. But tonight, you're still here, and that, somehow, is enough. You dream of fire, not a roaring blaze or a tidy hearth, but a impossibly large, hanging low over green fields. You're barefoot, warm, laughing. Then someone whispers your name, and the light fades. You wake up with a start, not from a noise, but from a feeling, a cold air brushing your cheek like a thief checking for life. The fire's dead again, just embers. You sit up and your joints creak like ancient hinges. There's a layer of frost on the inside of the walls now. You blink and see it, a delicate web of ice crystals, crawling across the beams like a lace doily spun by winter itself. It's beautiful, and awful. The others stir slowly, one by one, like bears unwilling to face the world. Blankets shift, a cough cuts through the silence. Someone whispers a prayer. You all rise, not because you want to, but because you must. There's water to fetch, animals to check, traps to inspect. You pull on your frozen boots like armor and prepare to step into another day of white silence. But first, breakfast. You gather around the hearth again, hoping for something warm, but there's no stew, no bread, only a weak porridge made from millet and boiled snow. Mainstream fact: many medieval peasants subsisted on gruel's watery blends of oats, barley, millet, or rye, especially in the cold months. Rich in calories, low in flavor, it kept people alive, just barely. The pot clinks as you stir it with a wooden spoon. Everyone gets a scoop, no one complains. Hunger doesn't leave room for critique. You eat, you chew, you pretend it tastes like roasted meat. Someone jokes that the snow gives it texture. Another says they missed our seasoning. It's a poor joke, but it gets a smile. That's fuel too. Here's a strange fringe tidbit. Some peasants believed eating snow would cool the soul and prevent illness. Others thought it was dangerous, that it stole heat from your stomach and left your heart open to death. So, people only drank melted snow. You, personally, think both are bad, but water's water. Historians still argue whether the worst medieval famines were caused more by nature or nobility, climate shifts, or lords hoarding grain. You don't need a scholar to tell you it's probably both. All you know is the granary is locked, and your belly isn't. After breakfast, you check the traps in the woods. They're mostly empty. One has a mouse. You consider eating it. Seriously, you bring it home. Your brother skins it, and your mother roasts it over the fire with sage and silence. It tastes like meat. It tastes like more. You don't tell the little ones what it was. That night, as you lie beside the hearth again, someone lights a scrap of beeswax, just a stub, enough for an hour or two. You watch the flame flicker and think about the summer fields, about the feel of bare earth under your feet, about apples and berries and shade, but mostly, you think about tomorrow's traps, tomorrow's walk, tomorrow's breath, and for the 100th time this winter, you wonder, how many more tomorrows like this will there be? And the candle burns, and the frost thickens, and your heartbeat is steady, stubborn, and refuses to stop. The sky this morning is different, not warm red, don't be ridiculous, but brighter. The clouds have pulled back just enough to reveal a shy sliver of blue, pale and trembling, like a newborn colt. You step outside and blink against the sudden light. It feels foreign, almost rude. The snow still blankets everything. Roofs sag, doors creak, a fence post has snapped and vanished beneath the drifts. But something's changed. The air is just a little less sharp. The wind has lost some of its teeth. You can smell mud under the snow. You exhale, and for the first time in weeks, your breath doesn't freeze instantly. Inside, someone says they dreamed of geese honking over thawed pond. Another says the hens laid 2 eggs today too. It might be coincidence, it might be nonsense, or it might be the oldest kind of hope, small, quiet, and impossible to kill. Mainstream fact: by late February in medieval Europe, signs of change often appeared even in the coldest years. Surprising, buds forming, days lengthening by slivers. It wasn't spring, but it wasn't the worst of winter anymore. You decide to sweep the hearth, just because you can. You clean out the ashes, lay a new stack of kindling, feed the fire like you believe it'll be needed less soon. The flame catches easily. It's as if the wood has stopped fighting. Outside, a neighbor calls to you. They're digging out their beehive just to check if anything survived. You help. It's mostly for their ritual. The bees are gone, of course, but it's the trying that matters. A fringe tidbit for the final stretch. In parts of medieval Germany, people would whisper to their hives during winter, updating the bees on village gossip. It was believed to keep the colony in touch with life and less likely to die. Some say it worked, others say it just made people feel less alone. Historians still argue whether these rituals were rooted in folklore or agricultural wisdom. You know this much. Rituals keep people sane, and in a world where so much is uncertain, even the strangest traditions give you something to hold on to. Tonight, the house is warmer, maybe from the fire, or maybe just from belief. You light the candle earlier than usual, not out of fear of darkness, but to enjoy the flicker. The children sit close, not from desperation, but from habit. You sip thin broth, now flavored with actual herbs. Your brother found wild thyme under a sun-facing rock. It's not much, but it tastes like memory. And finally, when everyone else drifts into sleep, you sit alone by the fire. The last candle wavers, the shadows stretch and soften. You think of all you've endured: the ice, hunger, wolves, silence, and still, you sit. You're not warm, but you're alive, and soon, the world will turn again. The flame dances lower, softer now, like it knows the story is ending. You stretch out beside it, limbs heavy but calm. The shadows on the wall grow long and still, no longer sharp-edged or hungry. Outside, the wind has quieted into something gentler, just the faint rustle of snow slipping from rooftops, the hush of trees relaxing their frost-covered limbs. You close your eyes and let the silence wrap around you. You've made it through the long night. You've heard the wolves in the dark, counted your breaths while the fire faded, whispered nonsense to the morning sky in hopes it would listen. You've eaten things you never thought edible, slept beneath blankets that itched like nettles but saved your life, and shared heat with strangers and goats alike. And through it all, you've endured. The cold might still come back, the snow might fall again, but tonight, you rest with the quiet strength of someone who's seen the worst and stayed standing. Let your breath settle, let your thoughts drift, let the last golden glow of the fire pull you towards sleep like a lullaby written in smoke. There's nothing more you need to do. No more wood to gather, no more walls to patch, just rest. The cold will wait, and in this moment, beneath the old beams, beside the last flickering candlely broken bar, you are safe, you are warm enough, and you are home. Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world without central heating, electric blankets, or even so much as a humble fireplace. Imagine this, you're waking up in a pitch-dark, one-room hut, the kind with a roof that leaks and walls that sweat cold. The air is so frigid you can see your own breath drifting like a ghost above your straw-stuffed bed. There's no fire crackling in the corner, no chimney, just you, your stiff limbs, and the bitter knowledge that sunrise is hours away. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and I'd love to know where are you listening from. And what time is it for you right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're curled beneath a heap of straw and animal skins. It smells vaguely of mildew and yesterday's soup. Your breath fogs the air, and your nausea, oh, your poor nausea is so cold it feels like a frozen berry waiting to fall off your face. Welcome to winter in a 14th century peasant village. Your hut was built with love, and mud, mostly mud, and while mud makes for a charming natural insulator, it also makes for some excellent cold storage when winter sets in. The walls seep dampness, the wind slips through gaps you never noticed during the summer. And you're tucked in as tight as possible, your knees hugged to your chest. Because fetal position isn't just casual, it's survival. Historians still argue whether the average medieval peasant home even had a central fire or if most families relied solely on communal hearths outside. What's clearer is this: for many of the poorest, even having a fire pit inside meant choking on smoke and struggling to vent it without a chimney. Chimneys were fancy. You are not fancy. Instead, you rely on body heat and luck. Maybe your spouse or your child is curled up beside you. Maybe you even let the dog under the covers, not because you like the smell of wet fur, but because warmth is warmth. Even lice, your ever-present roommates, seem sluggish in this cold. Small win, there's a damp cloth wrapped around your feet, and you're praying it stays dry long enough to keep your toes from turning black. You know someone who lost a toe last year. They didn't even notice until spring. Charming. right? The straw mattress beneath you is scratchy and full of mystery lumps of some vegetable, some rodent, probably, but it's better than sleeping directly on the icy floor, which right now is hard as stone and likely frozen in patches. Some nights you swear you can hear the ground cracking beneath you. That's not just a dream. And outside, the wind howls like a banshee denied dinner. It claws at the door, rattling the uneven wooden planks like it knows you're weak and wants in, but you're used to its games. You've made peace with the fact that winter isn't something you endure, it's something you wrestle, every night, until one of you gives up. And as your stomach rumbles because yes, food is another story we'll get there, you pull the fur blanket higher, close your eyes again, and wonder what tricks your ancestors used to survive this before you, before fire, before fireplaces, before even the idea that warmth was a right, not a miracle. You're about to find out. You blink groggily, then flinch as a frigid droplet of water lands squarely on your forehead. Thatched roof, beautiful in theory, treacherous in winter. The tightly packed bundles of straw above you, meant to keep rain out and warmth in, are soaked from last night's sleet, and now, they've decided to weep softly over your bed, one icy teardrop at a time. Lucky you, you sit up, if you can call it sitting, more like unfolding. Your back aches from the hard straw bedding, a straw you fluffed by hand, carefully layering it into an approximation of softness. But who are we kidding? It's a glorified pile of dried weeds and mouse droppings. Your blanket slides off your shoulders, and in that instant, the cold slaps you like a feudal tax collector with something to prove. The bed is just a wooden frame, if you even have one. Some families sleep directly on the floor, pushing straw into corners and calling it good, but if you're lucky, you sleep in what's called a cruck-housey, the more stable version of a medieval hut, made with curved timber and some semblance of sturdiness. Still no fireplace, still no chimney, just that glorious roof leaking on your pillow and an open hole near the peak of the ceiling to let the smoke out, which, in practice, lets the cold in faster than you can say frostbite. You reach for your clothes. They're not dry, of course not. They're the same ones you wore yesterday, and the day before, and possibly the week before. You pull on the tunic that smells of smoke and turnips, then wrap yourself in whatever cloth you can find. Nothing's truly clean in here, just varying shades of damp. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants had separate sleeping quarters. Some believe the bed was shared by the entire household, humans and animals alike, while others point to partitioned areas in higher status homes. Either way, privacy isn't a concept you recognize. If someone gets up to use the pot in the middle of the night, everyone hears it, and yes, it's just a pot in the corner. Try not to knock it over. As you crouch near the hearth, if you're lucky enough to have a fire pit, you glance at the pile of damp firewood and sigh. Last night's coals are long dead. No glowing embers, no warm ash, just a blackened hollow filled with regret and soot. You poke at it anyway, as if sheer hope could ignite something, but not today. So you move to plan B. You start stomping your feet, clapping your hands, doing a half-hearted medieval version of a jumping jackal to get your blood flowing before your toes surrender entirely. Your breath mists in the air as you mutter to yourself about the cruelty of January, and then you hear it, the steady drip, 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 from the roof again, like some medieval torture device reminding you, you live here. For the quirky tidbit of the morning, did you know some peasants believed that sprinkling ash along the perimeter of their hut kept winter spirits at bay? It didn't, but hey, it made them feel better, and ash was plentiful, so your grandmother probably swept a line of it across the door and told you not to cross it without spitting first, for luck. Or maybe just out of habit. As you peer through the slits in your wall, because windows are just holes stuffed with enamel bladders or wooden shutters, you spot the faintest orange glow rising from the east. Dawn, time to face the day, but you already know that first step outside is going to be worse than whatever the wind threw at your roof last night. You sigh, The mattress may be damp, but at least it's not frozen mud. You shuffle across the frozen floor like a sleep-deprived goblin, dragging a wool scrap behind you like some sad medieval superhero cape. Your feet sting as they touch the icy ground. Your shoes are nowhere to be found. Not that it matters, they're made of stitched together scraps of leather and wool, more whole than soul at this point. So barefoot it is, you head toward the warmest spot in the house, not near a fire, because you still don't have one, but toward the lumpy pile of humanity and livestock squished in the corner. It's snuggling time. No, not the romantic, candlelit kind, more like a survival cuddle puddle. Your siblings are already there, snoring in sync like some grumpy choir. You wedge yourself in between your sister, who mumbles in her sleep, and your goat, who smells like a broken bar. Well, a goat, but her breath is warm, and warmth is currency. You can feel the heat radiating off your younger brother's back. You press your fingers to it, leeching as much warmth as you can without waking him. You're a medieval heat thief, and there is no shame in that. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers truly brought animals inside for warmth or only for protection, but in your home, it's not up for debate. The cow's in the corner, and the chickens are nesting under the bench. The pigs, you still have Onia is curled near the door, snorting softly. You're all roommates in this fight against the frost. There's a logic to it. Cows generate a surprising amount of heat. So does a pig. Add a few humans, a roof, and some packed straw on the walls, and suddenly, you're in a low-tech sauna that smells like manure and dreams. You roll closer to your sister. She elbows you. You elbow back. Classic medieval love language. Your mother, already awake, shuffles around in the dimness, wrapping a cloth around her head and muttering something about demons and the walls again. You don't argue. Maybe she's talking about mice. Maybe she's not. You let your eyes drift half shut again. There's a window-sized hole above the sleeping pile, covered in stretched sheep bladder. It's fogged up now, translucent and glistening with frost. You stare at it, half hypnotized by the shimmer. It's like watching ice dream. Then your father bellows something about chores. Of course, no one gets to sleep, not even during the death-defying chill. You groan and slide off the human-animal sandwich, your body instantly punished by the cold. Fun fact: in parts of rural Europe, villagers even believed that spooning in a specific formation alternating head to foot could distribute warmth more effectively. Whether it worked or just made things smell worse remains unclear. You've tried it. Let's just say a broken bar. There were regrets. Outside, you hear another family arguing about shared grazing rights, loudly, at dawn, because there's nothing like communal living to keep things cozy and mildly hostile. You trudge toward the corner to find your tunic has frozen into a weird shape. You crack it back into wearable form, then wrap yourself in your scratchiest woolen cloak. It's the only one you've got. As you pull it around your shoulders, you glance at your little sister, still asleep with her arms wrapped around the chicken basket. You envy her peace, but also she smells like feathers and onion peel. You back away slowly. The chill has numbed your fingers again. You curl them into fists inside your sleeves and breathe into them. It helps. A little. Snuggling in the medieval era wasn't optional, it was strategy. Affection came second to insulation, and while the concept of personal space hadn't been invented yet, you wouldn't want it anyway. Not tonight. You glance at the ceiling again. Drip, drip, still leaking. You finally pull yourself away from the human-animal furnace and step across the floor, if you can call it that. It's a dirt floor, and not the soft kind, either. This one is packed, uneven, riddled with divots, and right now, hard as frozen stone. You imagine it was once mud. Now it's a medieval skating rink with potholes. Your heel lands in something wet. You freeze. Please let that be water. You squint. It's not water, it's the chamber pot. Again, knocked over by the pig in the night. Or maybe your clumsy cousin trying to relieve himself without getting frostbite. You sigh and step carefully around the splash zone. No one's got the energy to clean it before breakfast, or ever. Fun historical note: chamber pots were often emptied out the front door. That's not just gross, it's dangerous. In winter, it forms a frozen slope of horror right at your doorstep. You've seen more than one villager wipe out carrying a bundle of firewood and end up smelling like last night's stew and this morning's regrets. Back in your corner of the hut, you feel around for your woven slippers. Not shoes, slippers. Bits of old cloth wrapped around bits of older cloth. You shove your feet inside. It's like putting your toes into damp bread. But better than nothing, probably. Historians still argue whether peasants kept separate areas for sleeping and living. Some say they did, citing archaeological layouts of one-room houses with designated clean corners. Others say that's wishful thinking, based on the goat currently pooping in the sleeping area. You're inclined to agree with Team Chaos. You glance toward the door. A thin sheet of ice coats the wooden frame. The latch is stuck again. You'll have to lift it with both hands and hope it doesn't break off entirely this time. But before that, you grab the bucket. The one you're supposed to fill from the well. It's frozen solid. You bang it against the wall a few times, but all you manage is a new dent and a splinter in your thumb. And now the pig's chewing on the hem of your cloak. You push it away with your foot, but it keeps coming. You admire its persistence. It might survive this winter better than you. After all, it has built-in insulation and zero shame. You have itchy wool, a grumpy attitude, and a thin layer of goosebumps that haven't gone away since Michaelmas. As you make your way toward the door again, your fingers brush against the thatch curtain that separates the sleeping nook from the main area of the house. It's damp. Everything is damp, even the air. Somehow, the cold has managed to make the very atmosphere wet, like the inside of a soggy boot. You duck your head under the beam of low ceilings, mean bruised foreheads for generations, and tug open the door. The wind slaps you immediately, gleefully. It barrels inside like it's been waiting all night for an invitation. You close your eyes and brace for it. This is your morning routine. Not a jog, not yoga, just braving the full-body insult of medieval January air. You step outside, barely. The path is slippery. The frost has a crust, and you don't trust your shoes. You grab a stick to steady yourself, the same stick your father uses to prod the pig, and the same one your mother uses to reach high shelves. Multi-purpose technology. Your breath huffs out in clouds. The sky is gray, like dirty wool. In the distance, you hear someone chopping wood, a luxury. You haven't had dry wood in weeks. Everything's soaked, or stolen, or both. And then you hear it, the shrill voice of old widow Magda, cackling about someone falling into the well again. You make a mental note to be extra careful today. You turn back inside, half frozen and fully annoyed. At least the pig stopped chewing your cloak. You slump back inside, bucket still frozen solid, cloak crusted with frost, and dignity mostly left out on the doorstep. Time for the next trick in your anti-freeze survival routine, the warm rock. You shuffle toward the hearth. Well, it's more of a shallow pit filled with disappointment and ash. Someone, likely your father, managed to rekindle a sputtering flame. It's coughing smoke more than it's giving off heat, but you'll take it. You squat beside it, reach into the soot-blackened corner, and there it is, a small, round stone, still warm from last night's embers. It radiates the kind of heat you'd sell your goat for. You wrap it in a scrap of wool and shove it inside your tunic, right against your ribs. Instant relief, like a medieval hot water bottle, minus the water and minus the bottle, and probably plus fleas. Fun fact, warming stones were a staple trick among peasants. Heated in the fire, they were then used in beds, in cloaks, or even tucked inside boots. Of course, if you didn't wrap them properly, you'd get a charming souvenir in the form of a blister that smelled faintly of sheep. Historians still debate whether these stones were common knowledge or passed down in secret by grandmothers who also knew 12 ways to cook a beet. In your case, it was your aunt. She had no teeth, 6 scars, and the patience of a fence post, but she swore by warm stones and threats of death if you used the good wool to wrap them. You sit beside the hearth now, arms wrapped tight around your knees, letting the stone do its slow magic. The smoke drifts upward as sort of, there's no chimney, remember, so it just coils lazily around the rafters, mixing with the smell of wet wool and something vaguely rotten, onion, maybe, or your socks. Your sister stirs and joins you, plopping down with all the grace of a sack of turnips. She eyes your rock with suspicion, then envy, then resignation. You toss her another from the hearth edge. She grins, shoves it under her armpit, and sighs like she's in a noblewoman's bath. That's when a pig trots over and tries to sit on your lap. You push him away. Again, your mother bustles in, holding a clay bowl filled with what looks like hot mush. She sets it near the fire with a warning not to eat until it's cooled. You ignore her and grab a spoon anyway. The moment the warm food hits your mouth, your entire body sighs in relief. It's just barley and onion peels, maybe a shred of old cabbage, but it's hot. And hot equals hope. You cradle the bowl and lean your back against the wall. The warmth from the food, the stone, the sputtering fiery, it's not much, but it's everything. And then comes the sound, a deep, wet cough from your father, a reminder that smoke, while warm, is also poison in a house without proper ventilation. You've all grown used to iodine stinging. Throats roll, but it wears you down. Historians now believe smoke inhalation was one of the leading causes of chronic illness among peasants. Not the plague, not famine, just breathing your own roof. And every day, you look up at the smoke-stained rafters. There's a small bird up there, probably nesting in the thatch. You admire its resilience, or maybe you envy it. It can fly somewhere warmer. You've got another 4 months of this. The rock in your tunic begins to cool, but for a moment, just a moment, you're okay. The warmth from your rock is fading, and so is the fleeting comfort of breakfast. Time to move again, because in a house with no fireplace, no insulation, and no proper walls, stillness is your enemy. Movement means heat, even if it's the kind that makes your joints creak like a medieval drawbridge. You start preparing the day's second most important ritual, making something edible that won't kill you. Spoiler, your standards are low. You shuffle toward the cooking corner, which is more of a dark zone with a 3-legged iron pot squatting over a scorched patch of dirt. Your mother's already there, stirring a thick, brownish-gray stew that smells of hope and boiled root vegetables. It's not good, but it's hot, and that's the entire criteria. The stew is mostly turnips again, maybe a carrot if someone got lucky, some onion skin for flavor, a pinch of dried herbs if you're feeling rich. No meat, of course, that went out with the first frost, or got traded for cloth, or died of the pox. Historians believe that the average medieval peasant consumed around 3,000 calories a day, mostly from bread and thick soups. And if you're wondering, no, it wasn't gourmet, think edible mud, but chunky. You stir the pot, watching the watery sludge bubble like a tired volcano. You're careful not to scrape the bottom. Burnt bits make the whole thing bitter. Your sister stands beside you, clutching a wooden bowl and licking her lips. Her face is still red from sleeping beside the goat, and her hair smells like hay. You try not to breathe too deeply. The pot gives off just enough steam to fog the nearby wall, which then immediately ices over because science isn't fair. You grab a ladle, really just a carved wooden scoop, and begin filling bowls for the family. Your father takes his without a word. Your mother mutters something about the salt being low. You didn't even know there was salt in it. You sit down and slurp the first mouthful. It burns your tongue slightly. Perfection. Quirky tidbit for today: medieval people sometimes added ashes to their food for flavor and health. Yes, ashes. You once saw your aunt do it. swore it cleansed the humors. She also believed frogs in your bed cured back pain. So grain of salt, or ash, the stew warms your stomach, sending tentative signals to your toes like, hey, you're still alive down there? They don't respond, probably sulking. You hunch over your bowl, savoring every drop. You know the next meal could be hours away or worse, outdoors. If there's a village feast coming up, you might get bread, real bread, with a crust and everything. But for now, you sip and dream. Then your sister farts, loudly, no shame. Everyone hears it, no one reacts, because in a smoke-filled, stew-scented, straw-laden hovel, a little flatulence is the least of your problems. Historians still argue about the use of spices in peasant diets. Some say herbs like marjoram and garlic were common, others claim flavor was sacrificed for calories. But you'd kill for pepper. Outside, someone yells, likely the neighbor boy chasing a runaway sheep again. You'll deal with him later. Right now, you tilt the bowl and sip the last oily spoonful of the turnip sludge. It's lukewarm now, but still better than being cold and hungry. You wipe your mouth with your sleeve and lean back, belly full enough to feel human again. Then the wind shrieks down the chimneyless vent hole and slaps the back of your neck with a gust of Arctic sarcasm. Back to reality. You're done eating, or at least pretending to eat. Your bowl's empty, your stomach is slightly less empty. And now it's time to armor up, because surviving the cold in the medieval winter without a fireplace means dressing like you are about to hike up Mount Misery in a burlap sack. First, the base layer, a linen shirt. It's stiff from repeated freezing and thawing, and the armpits are permanently crunchy. You slip it on anyway, shivering as the cold fabric hits your skin like a slap from a disapproving monk. Then come the trousers, of wool, scratchy, and somehow always damp no matter how often you air them. And let's not even talk about the smell. Wool, and more wool, layers upon layers. You tug on a second tunic, a third if you can find one. The top layer is so thick it makes your arms stick out like a scarecrow's. You can't move fast, but you're warmer, kind of. This is less about fashion, more about survival cosplay. Quirky fact: in some regions, peasants even wore woolen underpants, homemade, itchy, and thick enough to make walking feel like waddling through sheep. You tried a pair once. It was a broken bar, life-changing, not in a good way. Next, the leg wraps along strips of wool or linen. You spiral around your calves like you're mummifying yourself. They trap warmth, keep out drafts, and collect snow like a sponge. Finally, you loop a belt around your waist, mostly to hold everything in place and make sure you don't unravel by lunchtime. Historians still debate whether peasants had access to consistent winter clothing or if they just wore whatever they could salvage. Some accounts suggest entire villages sharing garments and rotation, like a communal coat lottery. Your family's version? Find it first, wear it first. You reach for your cloak, a thick, hooded rectangle of wool that serves as your coat, blanket, pillow, and rain shield. It's been patched so many times it looks like a quilt made by someone with no color sense and less thread. You throw it over your shoulders, the familiar weight pressing down like a woolen hug from a very tired ant. You step toward the door again. It creaks. It always creaks. You pull your hood low, wrapping it snug around your cheeks like a scarf made of brambles. The wind is already howling outside like it's auditioning for a horror story. Before you leave, you grab your mittens, two mismatched socks repurposed with tortilla, and slip them on. You look like a swamp creature from a folktale no one wants to hear twice, but you're warm, mostly. You glance down, your feet, wrapped in cloth, shoved into leather soles, tied with string. Waterproof? Not a chance. Stylish, in a horrifying, cave goblin kind of way. But again, if this is survival, not runway. Your sister walks past, arms filled with firewood she probably borrowed from the neighbor's pile. You nod in silent approval. She's wearing your old cloak, The one with the goat bite. You don't argue. You're past that now. You're both just trying to survive the next cold front. The final step. Movement. You begin pacing the hut, arms tucked in, swinging your legs to chase the warmth up from your core. Everyone does this dance. The medieval cardio shuffle. No one talks about it. No one stops. Because stopping, that's when the cold winds dodge. You step outside again, swaddled in enough wool to make a sheep blush. Your breath puffs into the air, curling like ghostly ribbons as you trudge through the half-frozen mud path that runs through your village. The sun, if you can call it that, glows dimly through a gray sky like someone smeared butter on the window. Your cloak is already dragging in the slush, picking up twigs and bits of old straw like it's auditioning for a nature documentary. But you don't mind. This cloak is everything. It's your armor, your shield, your sleeping bag, your tent, and sometimes your privacy curtain when the bushes are too far away. The medieval cloak isn't some dramatic swirling cape like you see in movies. It's a thick, heavy rectangle pinned at one shoulder or tied at the neck, often with a hood so deep it doubles as a face blanket. You pull yours tighter around you now as the wind slaps your cheeks with the attitude of a feudal lord demanding taxes. You pass by other villagers doing the same. I'm not freezing. You're freezing walk. Everyone's bundled in their versions of cloaks, tunics, and shapeless layers, looking like a traveling circus of wool ghosts. Someone's cloak is made from an old feed sack. Someone else's has a patch shaped like a chicken. Fashion is not a thing here. Warmth is. Historians believe cloaks were among the most essential garments for medieval peasants. A good one was handed down like treasure, often repaired, repurposed, or even buried with its owner. You once heard about a man who stole another man's cloak during a blizzard and was found frozen stiff days later with both cloaks. That's not tyranny. That's just cold, poetic justice. As you walk toward the fields, your cloak catches on a bramble bush and nearly pulls you into a snowdrift. You curse under your breath but softly, because your grandmother believed swearing during winter called down angry frost spirits. You don't believe it, of course. But also a broken bar. You're not taking chances. Quirky tidbit. Some folks would soak their cloaks in animal fat before winter to waterproof them. You tried it once. It worked. Unfortunately, you smelled like rancid bacon for a month and were chased by every stray dog in the village. You squat near the edge of a fence to collect firewood. What little of it isn't already claimed or frozen solid. It's damp, splintered, and barely enough to warm a cup of broth. But it's something. You wrap it in your cloak like a baby and carry it back, the bundle thudding softly against your hip. Back home, your brother is curled up by the hearth pit, already hogging the warm rock rotation. You grunt at him, he grunts back. A full conversation. You toss the wood near the fire pit and kneel beside him. Your cloak falls around you like a tent, sealing in the precious heat. This, right now, is luxury. It doesn't matter that your feet are wet, your fingers numb, or that you just sat on a chicken feather. This is warmth in any form. Historians still argue whether cloaks doubled as bedding. You'd laugh if your jaw weren't half frozen. Of course they did. You slept under it, on it, inside it, and once, with it, when your mattress collapsed in the middle of the night and you cocooned on the floor like a tired moth. Tomorrow, you'll wear it again, and the day after, and probably every day until spring. If spring ever returns, you close your eyes, just for a moment, letting the damp wool press against your cheek. It's scratchy, it smells like earth and smoke. And it's the only reason you're not a popsicle with opinions. You wake up for the third, or is it the fourth? Time tonight, to the snuffling sound of a cow chewing cud 5 inches from your face. The glow of the coals has long faded, and the room is pitch black, save for a faint sliver of moonlight squeezing through the sheep bladder window. Yes, the cow's inside. Again, you roll over, bump into your little brother's elbow, then into the side of the pig. It grunts but doesn't move. Welcome to medieval peasant winter sleeping arrangements like camping, but with hooves. Bringing livestock indoors during winter isn't just about security, it's your heating system. The cow, the pig, the chicken said they radiate warmth, even if they also radiate smell. Historians have argued whether this practice was commonplace or more situational, but honestly, when the frost is biting and the roof is sweating, no one's turning away a warm body. Even one with horns. The cow shifts, and you hear it fart. It's oddly comforting. Your hut is a single room, and in winter, it's less of a home and more of a barn with people. There's no dividing line between kitchen, bedroom, and stable. You're all just arranged in a lumpy pile of straw and stubbornness. You'd complain, but that cow kept your feet from freezing off last week, so you owe her one. The chickens cluck softly from under the bench. They've figured out that sleeping near the fire pit even when it's cold is better than freezing in their coop. Plus, fewer foxes inside the house. You remember when the sheep were allowed in, but they chewed through the thatch and pooped on the bedding. That was a tense week. Your older sister tosses in her sleep, mutters something about stew, and elbows the dog, who yelps, then settles again, nose tucked under its tail. The pig lets out a snort, turns in a circle, and flops back down with a wet. You once asked your mother how people put up with the noise, the stink, the crowded chaos. She shrugged and said, better a smelly home than a grave. Valid point. Quirky tidbit: in some regions, peasants built actual stalls inside their homes for livestock like miniature barns within the hut. Others just left the animals to roam and hoped no one stepped on anything soft during the night. You pull your cloak tighter, the cow breathes slow and steady, you sync your own breath to hers. You're warm, in a weird, barnyard sort of way. Sure, your pillow is a sack of grain, and someone's foot is under your ribs, but it's warmer than the snowdrift outside. Still, there are drawbacks. One time, your brother woke up with a chicken nesting on his head. Another time, the pig stole a loaf of bread off the hearth and got sick on the straw bedding. But those are just the risks of having house guests who say nothing and eat everything. Historians still debate whether this mingling of human and animal life contributed to disease. The answer is probably, but cold kills faster than most bugs do. And fleas? You've made your peace with them. They live here, too. You snuggle down beside the pig. You hate to admit it, but it's warm, really warm, like a squishy, snorting furnace. You whisper thanks to it and close your eyes again. Outside, the wind howls, but in here, in this heap of snoring family and livestock, you're not just surviving, you're kind of winning. You don't sleep the whole night through. No one does. Not in this cold. Not in a hut where the only thing separating you from the elements is a patchy thatch roof and the occasional pig belly. Instead, you sleep in bursts of short stretches of semi-conscious dozing, punctuated by shifts in position and muffled curses when someone kicks the chamber pot again. It's not exactly restful, but it's survival. You wake up sometime in the middle of the night to find your feet numb and your left arm wrapped around a chicken. She doesn't look pleased, but she's not moving either, so you take it as consent. Around you, the rest of your family is doing the same thing, rotating positions like a slow-motion carousel of shivering peasants. Your little brother, formerly the warmest spot in the heap, has rolled toward the fire pit, chasing an ember glow that no longer exists. You slide into his place like a thief in the night and wrap your arms around the dog instead. He grumbles. You ignore it. This system isn't random. It's rotation, an unspoken routine honed by years of winters just like this one. You all know when it's your turn to scoot closer to the cow or when you should yield your spot near the wall to someone who's gone too pale. Historians actually theorize that peasants developed informal sleeping rhythms to conserve warmth, keep watch over livestock, and when needed adjust positions based on who was at risk of frostbite. There's no science to it, just instinct and repetition. Also, no one wants to sleep by the door. The wind creeps in through the cracks like a jealous ghost. Last year, your cousin caught a chill that started with a cold toe and ended with a priest at her bedside. You still avoid that corner. Quirky tidbit: in some places, people actually slept sitting up, propped against walls or each other, because lying flat was believed to attract evil spirits or simply make it harder to breathe in smoke-filled rooms. You tried it once. Your back still hasn't forgiven you. Someone coughs, a child whimpers, your mother hums a quiet tune, one of those low, droning ones that sounds like a lullaby and a funeral dirge at the same time. It doesn't warm the room, but it softens it somehow. You close your eyes again. You've got maybe an hour before someone else takes your spot. That's how it works. Sleep, shift, repeat. No alarms, no sunrise yoga, just a slow, instinctive cycle of limbs and breath and shared heat. At one point, your father gets up and steps over the sleeping pile to tend to the dying coals. He pokes them with a stick, adds a soggy log, then shuffles back to his spot without a word. The fire flares weakly for a few minutes, then gives up. Understandable. You drift back under. Not into dreams, if there's no time for dreams, but into that strange, floaty place between sleep and awareness. You hear the wind outside, still angry, still pacing the hut like it's looking for a crack in your resolve. You snort quietly. Not tonight. You've got livestock, a rock-warmed tunic, and a goat trying to use your leg as a pillow. This isn't luxury, but it's life. And for now, that's enough. You're awake again. This time it's the cold that does it, not a person or a pig, but the kind of cold that creeps up your spine like a ghost with icy fingers. You sit up, groaning softly, and immediately notice something strange. Your inside wall is covered in frost, not condensation, not dew, actual frost. Crystals twinkling faintly on the wattle and daub like winter had the audacity to sneak in while you slept and redecorate. You drag your sleeve across the surface. The frost smears into a wet trail and leaves your cuff soaked. Great. Now your arm's cold and clammy. This isn't unusual, though. When it's cold enough, the interior walls of a poorly insulated medieval home can frost over just from your breath, your cooking, and the endless damp in the air. Moisture hangs in the room like a curse, and the moment it touches the frozen wall, it freezes like it's auditioning for a snow globe. You rub your hands together, blow on them, and glance over at the hearth. Empty. Of course, there's no wood left. Your father grumbles and reaches for his boots. Time to visit the communal fire pit, he mutters. You sigh, because this means you're going to. The communal fire pit is exactly what it sounds like. A shared fire built in the center of the village for everyone to use when their own hearths are dead or non-existent. It's usually surrounded by a circle of neighbors, bundled in patchy cloaks, jostling for space like a medieval mosh pit but with more stew. You throw on your cloak and step outside with your father, carrying the family's sorry excuse for firewood as sticks, old straw, a dry turnip top if you're lucky. The wind greets you like an old frenemy, slapping your cheeks as if to say, "Oh good, you're back." As you cross the frozen lane, you hear the cough of someone starting their own fire. Thick smoke curls from the roof of a hut nearby, trailing upward like a thread of warmth you want to follow. Lucky devils, probably got dry wood from the miller. Your father huffs. He traded a sack of oats for it. You nod. Oats are worth more than gold when your toes are turning purple. You reach the communal fire. It's surrounded by a few other early risers, faces hidden deep in hoods, hands outstretched toward the flames. The fire crackles and pops, throwing heat in waves that barely reach your knees. But it's something. You thrust your fingers toward it and exhale. Historians still argue whether these shared fires were daily fixtures or emergency measures during bad winters. What's clear is that not everyone had the luxury or the fuel to keep a home fire burning all night. Communal fires were a lifeline, and also a chance to catch up on village gossip, like who's letting their cow sleep in the kitchen, or who's stolen firewood again. You lean close to the flames, letting your face thaw. Someone hands you a stick with the end charred, a star tray used to carry the flame back to your home hearth. You cradle it like it's sacred, because right now, it kind of is. Back inside, your brother's building a tiny pile of kindling in the pit. You pass him the starter, and he lowers it gently. A small flame flares to life. You all pause, reverent. It's no fireplace, but it's fire. It'll do. Quirky tidbit. In some towns, fines were issued for letting communal fires die out. It was a group effort. After all, if one person slacked off, the whole village froze. You don't have fines here, just passive-aggressive glares and your grandmother's disappointed silence. As the flames grow, the room fills with smoke again. Your eyes sting, your throat scratches, but your hands are finally warm. You curl beside the hearth, cloak wrapped tight, and listen to the gentle hiss of damp logs burning. It's not elegant, it's not even healthy, but it's heat, and that means hope. Smoke curls around your face, thicker now, as the damp wood sizzles and protests from the hearth pit. You squint through the haze, blinking away tears as warmth finally begins to seep into your fingers and toes. The room smells like wet moss, scorched straw, and whatever creature last used the chimney hole as a shortcut, probably an owl, possibly a squirrel, hopefully not both. But heat is heat, and you're not about to complain. You stretch out near the fire, careful to avoid the cracking logs and the corner where the pig has decided to nap again. Every part of this house is multi-purpose: cooking corner, sleeping space, barn stall, and now a modest sauna, if your sauna had zero ventilation and a permanent draft. Still, the wind isn't hitting your face anymore. That's thanks to your mother, who's been plugging every possible hole in the wall with the kind of dedication usually reserved for religious relics. She's wedged old cloth into the biggest cracks. There's moss packed around the window frame, some dried mud slapped across a split timber beam, and in the top left corner, where the wind used to sing like a banshee with a grudge, she's stuffed a chunk of cow dung. It's not elegant, but guess what? It works. Medieval insulation was less about aesthetics and more about desperation. Historians agree that most peasants relied on materials they had at hand: moss, mud, hay, straw, rags, and yes, even dung. Especially dung. Turns out, when dried, it's surprisingly good at stopping wind and holding heat. Unpleasant? Absolutely. Effective? Also yes. You glance up at the thatch roof. There's a quilt nailed to the beams now, a one that used to be your baby blanket. Judging by the weird stitched bird in the corner, it's heavy with frost, but it keeps the cold air from pouring directly onto your sleeping pile. Your father has taken it a step further. He's hung spare cloaks over the door and even propped a wooden board against the base to block the gap where the dog used to crawl through. The dog now just jumps through a low window. You all pretend not to notice. You press your hand to one of the patched walls. It's still cold, but not icy. That's an improvement, a win, even. Your sister sneezes, sending a puff of straw into the air. She's curled up beside the hearth now, mumbling about how the draft keeps kissing the back of her neck. You offer her a scrap of burlap to stuff under the bench. She grunts and does it without thanks. Teamwork. Quirky tidbit: in some regions, villagers believed stuffing certain herbs like lavender or yarrow into cracks would keep not just the cold out, but also evil spirits. Your grandmother insists on lavender. Your uncle insists it's a waste of good seasoning. So now your window frame smells like stew in church. Outside, the wind still howls, but the house feels tighter. Not warm, exactly, but less exposed. Like a turtle finally realizing it has a shell. Historians still argue whether these homes retained any real heat. Some say the layout of the huda, a single room with low ceilings and few openings, helped trap body heat. Others argue that without insulation, it was like trying to warm a barn with a birthday candle. You'd argue both are true. It's freezing, But it could be worse. And every lump of moss and patch of cloth between you and the wind is another line of defense. The fire hisses again, a wet log steams like a lazy dragon. You pull your cloak around you, lean back against the slightly less damp wall, and let your eyes drift closed. This house may be half mud, half smoke, and held together with goat hair and prayers. But tonight, it's holding. You sit motionless by the hearth, wrapped in every layer you own, the smoky warmth curling sluggishly around your shoulders. The fire sputters now and then, like it's debating whether to live or give up, and you keep feeding it with scraps like you're coaxing an old friend to stay awake just a little longer. But then comes the part you hate most. The smoke stays in. Without a chimney, there's nowhere for it to go. The ceiling hole meant to let the smoke drift out just invites the wind back in, like a revolving door of medieval misery. So you sit in a grayish fog, eyes stinging, lungs tight, wondering if this is what dragons feel like when they get chest colds. You wave the smoke away half-heartedly. It swirls lazily and then settles back like it's judging you. No, you're not getting rid of it. You live in it now. It's part of the family. Historians believe that peasant homes without chimneys were the norm until well into the late Middle Ages. Why? Chimneys were expensive, hard to build, even harder to maintain, and anyway, a house filled with smoke did have one unexpected upside. It helped kill off the bugs. That's right, fleas, lice, even rats didn't love the smoky haze. You, however, are not a rat. You'd very much like to breathe. Still, there's a strange comfort in the smoke. It softens the sharp edges of the world, muffles sound, turns the room into a warm, glowing blur. Your mother hums again from the corner, her voice coasting through the haze like it's part of the fire. The chickens are unusually quiet. Even they seem to understand the unspoken rule. When the smoke settles low, you settle lower, move less, breathe shallow, conserve heat, avoid the ghost cough. Quirky tidbit: in some places, families deliberately kept their homes smoky through the night because the haze preserved food hanging from the rafters. You once licked the salt off a smoked beetroot that had been dangling above your bed all winter. It tasted like fire and sadness, but it was food. You glance at the rafters now, a few hunks of drying something, a meat, maybe, or parsnip skins dangle like eerie ornaments. The smoke has cured them into leathery strips. You make a mental note to ask if you're allowed to nibble them later. The dog stirs and sneezes violently, shaking ash from his fur. He blinks at you as if to say, "Why are we doing this again?" You shrug. Because this is the system. No fireplace, no chimney, just fire in a pit and a house full of fog. Outside, the wind howls again. It's tried the door, it's tried the roof. It's clawing at the seams of the wall now, testing every moss plug and patch of cow dung your mother packed in place earlier. But inside, you're sealed in by heat and haze. Historians still debate whether the health toll of indoor smoke outweighed its benefits. They cite lung damage, early respiratory illness, stunted growth in children, but they also acknowledge, a warm, smoky child was more likely to see spring than a cold, pristine one. You squint toward the fire, which has settled into a lazy, pulsing glow. It doesn't burn bright, but it burns long. That's what matters. You lie back against the straw matting, cloak over your head, the familiar sting of smoke in your nose and eyes. And oddly enough, you begin to relax, because the truth is, the smoke might choke you slowly, a broken bar, but the cold would kill you quickly. You wake again. Or maybe you never fully slept. The line between sleep and waking is blurry here, where hours pass in a haze of flickering firelight, half dreams, and creaking walls. The air's a little clearer now. The fire's smoldered down and the smoke has settled. But the cold? Oh, the cold is creeping back in, like a debt collector with frostbitten fingers. You pull your cloak tighter and rub your feet against the straw, trying to will friction into flame. It doesn't work. It never does. The straw just crinkles and shifts, and something sharp pokes you in the heel, Probably a forgotten root, or a needle, or bone. You don't ask questions anymore. Your brother mumbles something and shifts beside you. You nudge him to make room. He groans and throws a leg over your shin in retaliation. Sibling warfare. Medieval edition. Suddenly, from the far corner, your grandmother stirs. She's already whispering, not to you, to herself, or maybe to the walls. Her voice rasps out a string of old words you've heard 100 times. A blessing, a warning, a charm? She's saying it for warmth, or protection, or both. Saint Agatha, keep the wind from my bones. Saint Hubert, chase the chill from our blood. A broken bar. It's a mix of prayer and folklore, handed down from generations who survived winters that would have killed most modern folks in a week. And sure, it sounds ridiculous to think a saint or a whispered rhyme could stop your fingers from freezing off, but right now, you don't laugh, you listen, because when the fire dies, and the stones are cold, and the wind howls like it remembers your Namia, sometimes a prayer is the only blanket you have left. Quirky tidbit: some villagers believe that frost wasn't just weather, it was a creature, a spirit, a frost demon. Even that it crept into homes on the backs of rats or snuck through the keyhole if you forgot to spit on the threshold. Your mother spits every night before bed. She says it's for luck, but you know it's for fear. Historians still argue whether these folk traditions were widespread survival tools or just cultural echoes passed around the fire. Either way, they served a purpose: to give the cold a face, a name, something to curse or plead with when the wind slipped through your hair and made your teeth chatter like bones in a cup. You whisper a little prayer yourself now, not out loud, just in your head, to no one in particular, maybe to the fire, maybe to the goat, maybe to the sun you hope will rise tomorrow. The walls creak again. You look toward the window, is still fogged, but a faint glimmer pushes through. Moonlight, or is that the first stretch of dawn? You dare not hope. Your sister sighs in her sleep and curls tighter around the dog. The cow snorts, the pig grumbles, adjusting its vast, snoring bulk. The wind makes one last pass over the roof and then moves on. Bored for now, you lie back down, heart beating slow and steady, letting the warmth of bodies and belief cocoon you one more time. Maybe it's the charm, maybe it's the smoke, maybe it's just the weight of exhaustion pressing you down like a second blanket, but for once, you don't feel cold. Not yet. It happens slowly, in the dark, shifting from black to charcoal, the kind of soft light that seeps in without asking permission. You don't need to open your eyes to know that dawn is coming. You can feel it in the room, in the way the cold changes, less biting now, more like a dull ache in your joints. The fire has died, the stones are cold, but you're still here, alive. You stretch a little under your cloak, wincing as every joint protests. You're stiff, like a wooden puppet left out in the snow. Around you, the others are beginning to stir, one by one. No words yet, just the quiet, communal groaning of limbs rejoining the waking world. Your mother is already up, of course. She's prodding the hearth pit with a twig, hoping a rogue ember might still be hiding. No luck. She mutters a blessing, or maybe a curse. Your father is trying to lace up his shoes without waking the pig, which has somehow wrapped itself in his tunic. Outside, the wind has softened. You can hear the drip of melting frost from the roof, the quiet shifting of snow as it slides off the thatch. The rooster crows a single, pathetic squawk that sounds more annoyed than triumphant. You sit up slowly, your breath still fogs, but it doesn't feel like knives anymore. The frost on the inside wall has begun to melt. A droplet slides down the plaster, leaving a clear trail in the white. You follow it with your eyes. There's something oddly beautiful about it, like a silent signal that the worst part of the night has passed. Historians still argue whether peasants genuinely feared the night more than the day during winter. There are records of people dreading sundown, and not because of wolves or thieves, but because darkness meant stillness, and stillness meant cold, and cold meant the slow terror of not waking up. You glance at your sister. She's snoring again. Her nose is pink, her hair a mess of knots and straw, but she's breathing steady. You glance at the cow, still alive, the pig snuffles, the chickens flutter quietly beneath the bench. Everyone's made it. Quirky tidbit: in some villages, the end of a winter night was marked with a family ritually kissing the fire pit stones, or blessing the windows, or even offering the first spoon of broth to the house spirit. You've never done that, but right now, you get it, the impulse to thank something for this small victory. You stand. Slowly, you wobble a bit, but your legs still work. Outside the door, the first rays of sunlight split through the fog, pale gold, dusted with frost. You step toward it, just 1 foot out, just to test it. It's cold, of course, but not cruel. You exhale, the steam rises gently. You turn back inside, letting the door rest half open to invite the sun in. Your mother catches your eye and gives a quiet nod. It's not joy, it's not relief, it's just recognition. You did it. You survived another night without a fireplace. The fire is cold now, and so are the stones, but there's no need to stoke the embers anymore. Outside, the snow softens beneath the sun's first touch, and the wind, once cruel and sharp, has drifted into silence. You've unwrapped yourself from your cloak, the weight is gone from your shoulders. What's left is a calm heaviness in your limbs, the kind that follows a long night endured and past. Your breathing slows, matching the gentle hush of the morning around you. The housey mud walls, straw roof, patched with cloth and warmed by breath, stands quietly, as if holding itself together out of memory. And it will, for another day, because the cold came, and you held firm. In the dark, in the smoke, in the stillness, your eyes grow heavy again. You feel the stiffness leave your fingers, the tension melting from your spine. Even the sounds around you have softened. The rustle of straw, the low hum of your mother's voice, the familiar, comforting snore of the dog. It all blends into a lullaby written by time. You curl deeper into the straw, no longer needing to fight the cold, no longer counting the hours until dawn. That part is over. You're safe, you're warm enough, and tomorrow, if the wind returns, you'll meet it again with moss and rocks, cloaks and cows, songs and silence. But for now you rest. Sleep well.